What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men Red number 4 by Al Ewing, Juan Cabal, Andres Ginole, and Michael Santa Maria. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly why an intergalactic Shiar war is on the horizon. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's been up with Rockslide since Ten of Swords, and why 3 Omega level mutants cannot and will not be resurrected.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so this issue brought in a lot of really interesting points, the first of which is something that actually ties back to the recent events of Marauders number 3. That was an issue that I didn't do a video for, largely because I just didn't really have a whole heap of lot of time at the time. But what you need to know about that issue and what's been going on with Marauders lately is that the current Marauder squad still head up by Kate Pryde, but also co-led by the time-traveling mutant Bishop, and with the team also being sandbagged with the addition of Professor Xavier's wayward sister, Cassandra Nova. And right now, they're out in the far-flung reaches of the Shiar Galactic Empire, in the middle of a conspiracy that could potentially lead to Krakoa finding out about the first blood spilled, which is very likely the mutant lives that the Shiar have killed and enslaved millions, if not billions of years ago. In the midst of all this, Xavier's daughter, Xandra, who is the Empress of the Shiar Empire, she was killed by one of the Kin Crimson, Delphos, who was a sleeper agent for the Kin and was for all intents and purposes ready to take her down if she wouldn't get in line with protecting the secrets of the Shiar that the Kin Crimson have sworn to protect. So Xandra did in fact die in Marauders number 3, and with this being confirmed in this issue because it was left ambiguous as to whether or not Xandra was actually killed, we know for a fact because one of the Super Guardians, Arrako, said that Deathbird put in a contingency in case Xandra was ever killed, that it would unleash a type of psychic wave across the galaxy to reach the Arrako, and she would know whether or not anything had happened to Xandra if she weren't nearby. Now, this being a psychic wave of sorts, this also means that Charles Xavier would also pick up on this bit of information. Arrako is seemingly surprised by the fact that Charles Xavier would even catch wind of this, but once again, it's a psychic wave. They should have known that this was going to happen, not to mention, this is his own child. Of course, he is going to feel a psychic impression of some sort, regardless of whether or not they put in that contingency in the first place. It's one of those situations here where Charles, and I don't want to get off into too much of a tangent here, but it's one of those situations where this comic actually, in 2 different instances, almost seemingly changes the way we look at a couple of different mutants, and I'll get into the other one here in a minute, but Charles Xavier has not really been considered, at least after, the current Hickman relaunch of X-Men, to be an Omega level mutant. So far, the list of Omega level mutants include Jamie Braddock, aka Monarch. We also know that Iceman, Bobby Drake, is also an Omega level mutant. We know that Elixir, as well as Jean Grey, Legion, Magneto, Proteus. We know that Mr. M, Storm, Exodus, Kid Omega, Vulcan, and Hope Summers are all Omega level mutants, and Franklin Richards, while he was once considered an Omega level mutant, he is a mutant no more thanks to Dan Slott's Fantastic Four number 25. And that's not to say that those are all the Omega level mutants. We also know that the character Synch was recently revealed to be an Omega level mutant. In this particular instance, it almost kind of seems like Charles might be an Omega level mutant after all, even though he's not listed as one in House of X number 1. Storm seems to imply as much, and once again, I'm not saying the Storm is the end-all be-all when it comes to dictating whether or not someone is an Omega level mutant, but she does refer to him as perhaps the universe's most powerful telepath. Now, getting back to that, the reason why all this is going on is because right now the Shiar are trying to figure out what to do about Xandra. They're gonna have to figure out something. There are only 6 people in the entire universe who know right now that Xandra is dead, other than, well, Charles Xavier and, well, a few other people I'll get to here in a second. But right now, everyone's trying to figure out what to do. We have characters like, well, of course, we have Oracle. We also have Hulkling, who is the king, the emperor of the Kree-Skrull Empire. We have T'Challa himself, the Black Panther. We of course have Storm, as well as Nova of the Nova Corps. And last but not least, new recent X-Men villain, Orbis Stellaris. And right now, they're all trying to figure out what to do about this entire situation. Of course, as of the events of X-Men number 12, everyone on Earth knows that the X-Men have the ability to resurrect mutants. They know that all mutants on Krakoa, should they die, they can be brought back. This is brought up as a jab between Black Panther and Storm when he tries to give her a hard time about not telling her the truth about whether or not mutants could resurrect, which is also thrown back in his face because he has been using a mutant sleeper agent among the X-Men, one of the recent X-Vote contestants, as well as a Wakandan himself, the mutant Gentle. But that's neither here nor there. Black Panther and Storm are going through probably the roughest of rough patches, but the reason why I want to focus on Orbis Stellaris is because of the few people in the room who are trying to decide whether or not Xandra should be resurrected, since she is, in fact, half mutant. Black Panther seemingly has no interest in choosing a side, at least, speaking for the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, but Orbis Stellaris is probably the biggest detractor in regards to not wanting Xandra resurrected, and there's a reason for that. We already know, as of the recent Sword series that was also by Al Ewing, that Orbis Stellaris has been trying to play both sides, and we know that Orbis Stellaris has a weapons manufacturing gig going on, and right now, war is good for business. They want this war to happen because, as Oracle states, when word gets out that Xandra is in fact dead, there's going to be a veritable gold rush of people trying to take over the throne, or at the very least, take advantage of the Shiar's quotey fingers moment of weakness. But that said, Storm reveals that Xandra has already been resurrected. When Charles caught wind of the psychic wave from across the universe, he immediately pushed her to the front of the resurrection protocols. Xandra is already back. Now, we don't necessarily see her, but Storm has made it known that Hope Summers and the rest of the Five have already been put on the job by Xavier. As a matter of fact, we know that the character Sunspot was murdered by Iska the Unbeaten in the previous issue, and he is already being resurrected, and he's kind of surprised that Xavier's not there to greet him, but Hope says that he had something else come up, and that something else was very likely Xandra being brought back. He is probably spending time with her right now because I think as it stands, he hasn't seen Xandra in quite some time. But regardless of all that, war is coming to the Shiar's way because I'm pretty sure there are going to be people in that room who aren't happy with the fact that Xandra came back, as it is even brought up by Orbis Stellaris and even Black Panther, a ruler of an empire who can't die. That is something that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. And regardless of the intent behind it, Xandra is very likely just made some new enemies, even if they're not the people that are actually in the room right now. Definitely going to be people out there who are going to be gunning for the Shiar now, or maybe even people among the Shiar that are going to be gunning for her, and the Ken Crimson will probably be very high on that list. The good news is that Krakoa now has an ally among them in the form of Nova Corps member Richard Rider, aka Nova. Nova empathizes with what the Krakoans are going through because, as he even points out, he brings up the Annihilation War and how he resurrected the entire Nova Corps just to stop that threat. And while in the end, it all just wound up being undone anyway, when the rest of the Nova Corps was destroyed just the same, he understands why they did what they did. He's not mad at Krakoa for doing this. Even Oracle kind of seemed thrown off by the fact that Xandra was resurrected without the Shiar being told about it. For better or worse, take that how you wanna, but Nova gets it, and he wants to be among Storm and the rest of her brotherhood to lend a hand wherever he can. Even Storm says herself that having his perspective wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Now, getting more into the resurrection side of things, there are a couple more things that we have to talk about, and that is going to be the character Rockslide. Rockslide, who was killed off during the event of Ten of Swords, was resurrected, and as we remember, Rockslide came back wrong. This This is when we realize that when dying on another dimension or in another parallel universe or another reality, especially a place like Otherworld, it can have negative or maybe even positive effects on you when you're resurrected. Your backup becomes either corrupted or emboldened. When Rockslide was brought back, since he died in Otherworld, he came back, but instead of being the Santos that we all knew, he basically became an amalgam of all of the possible Santoses across the multiverse, which kind of led to him being this hot mess of confusion and bewilderment that no one really knew how to deal with. This also happened to the character Gorgon, who died in Ten of Swords. But we also saw the benefits of this, as we know that Orphan Maker and Nanny, when they died in a myth, they came back not broken, but hardened. They were more aggressive. They were even more powerful than they had been before. So it's one of those deals, it's kind of a catch-22. And what's going on right now is that in the wake of Sunspot being resurrected, he ends up running into Rockslide. And just his curiosity makes him ask some of the obvious questions. How is Rockslide doing? What's going on with him? And Rockslide seems to be, while everyone else misses the old Rockslide, this version of Rockslide, who the children on Krakoa have dubbed him Wrongslide, which sounds so terrible, but in the end it's a name he's embracing because he does agree he is the wrong Rockslide. He's not their Santos, and he talks about how being resurrected the way that he was, coming back as somebody else entirely different, it messed up everybody's heads. And I know a lot of people are going to say I'm reaching here, but there's an allegory here that I think a lot of people are not going to want to see. And it's one of those situations where while everyone misses the person he used to be, he has embraced the person that he's become. One can make a case for this being an allegory for transitioning, and take that how you wanna. It's one of those deals where people, trans people, whenever they transition fully to becoming the person that they, in their hearts and their soul, want to be and believe they are, sometimes the people who knew you before you transitioned have a difficult time adjusting to the person you become, while other people may just embrace you wholeheartedly. But I'll even agree, it might be a bit of a reach. I still don't think it's that far out of grasp. But right now, Wrongslide, as he is now accepted the name, he feels that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with him, and he doesn't want to die just to come back as somebody else. And while this version of Santos knows at some point he is going to die, he's perfectly okay with it, and when that does happen, he expects that another Rockslide will take his place, that the new Rockslide that's resurrected won't be the one that's standing before Sunspot right now, and maybe there's a potential possibility that when he dies, the old Rockslide might come back. But whatever the case is, he does feel like wherever it is he's going to die, he wants to die back in Otherworld. And he also talks about how whoever or whatever the next version of Rockslide becomes, they'll also have the memories that he has created since being resurrected after Ten of Swords. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because I think Sunspot might be up to something, because there is a question that he asked Rockslide while they're having this heart-to-heart, and it's whether or not he's been to Arrako yet. Now, we don't get the answer to this question, but what I like about this is that I think it's setting up something. I think that Sunspot is very likely trying to get Rockslide to see that, and maybe that if he goes to Arrako, maybe he might change his mind about some of the things that he's thinking, or to maybe help this version of Rockslide find some perspective, maybe to help him realize that maybe he has more to live for than just living to die. Now, once again, this whole issue is about resurrection, and it doesn't stop there. We learn in this issue that there are 3 Omega level mutants who will not be resurrected. And why this comes up is that when Magneto killed Tarn the Uncaring in the previous issue, he took up the Seat of Loss, replacing Tarn the Uncaring on the Great Ring of Arrako. This is something that the rest of the Great Ring isn't terribly happy about. They're just kind of accepting it, but they don't necessarily like it. And while Aura Serrata is explaining what the meaning of the Seat of Loss is, the fact that if one is to lose their seat, that they don't just get it back, and that's not just for the Seat of Loss, it's for all seats on the Great Ring of Arrako. But she says that the Seat of Loss is a very important one because the person who sits in that seat should understand what it means to lose something. And while we could go deeper into that, we actually talked about that in my video for Sword number 8, so I'll direct you that way if you want to know more about that. But the general idea here is that the mutants who sit on the Great Ring of Arrako, when they are killed, they do not resurrect. This is something that's brought up as a point of contention by even Magneto, who brings up the fact that Iska the Unbeaten, if she always wins, that should mean that she can't die, which means she would always sit in her spot on the Great Ring of Arrako, even though she freely admits that the day Genesis returns to Arrako, that she would gladly give up the seat. But it does raise an interesting question. If Iska the Unbeaten can't be, quotey fingers, defeated, then how on earth would she ever be removed from the Great Ring of Arrako if she were ever challenged? And I think we got our answer to that in the previous issue, that if someone dares or bets against her in such a way, I could see where some mental acrobatics could lead her to possibly losing, where in the case of Sunspot, he bet that Tarn the Uncaring would win in his battle against Magneto, which meant that Iska had to take the opposition because she had to win. Therefore, probability set itself out that Magneto would win. Now, Oros Arata seems to be of the belief that that really had very little to do with it, and that even if it did, it wouldn't really matter. The end result is the same. Tarn is dead. But that does give us some insight into how Iska could be challenged for her seat and lose and still be killed if someone maybe say, I don't know, dared her that she would win. Maybe that's a way for her to lose, because then she would have to prove that she was right. So if someone challenged her in a bet saying that she would win, she would have to take the opposition and say that she would lose. And that would be a way that she could be killed. And if that was the case, she wouldn't be brought back. But that said, Tarn lost, so he's not being brought back. We very likely will not see Tarn for quite some time. Now, that's not to say that he won't be resurrected. It's not the Araki way, but who's to say a character like Mr. Sinister wouldn't bring him back? We already know he's cloned him. A clone of Tarn is literally one of Mr. Sinister's first chimeras. Now, when it comes to the characters Magneto and Storm, what does this mean for them now that they sit on the Great Ring of Arrako? That means they can't be resurrected. Well, I mean, they can. It's nothing for Xavier to back them up and then have the 5 resurrect them should they ever die. However, Magneto has made a call for Storm in her place. She's not there at the Great Ring when this decision is being made, but as she does say earlier in the issue, that Magneto knows her heart and that he will speak for her in a way that she is not going to disagree with. And well, it seems kind of crazy to say that considering what Magneto has just done, but Magneto has taken a device called the Cerebro Drive that's created by Forge, who, as I said earlier, we got the inclination that 2 characters in this comic were elevated to Omega level mutant status, and that other character that I alluded to is Forge. Magneto directly refers to him as an Omega level mutant. This is hilarious, if for no other reason the fact that Al Ewing is basically saying, no, Hickman was wrong. Because if you go back to House of X #1 and that readout I showed earlier, which I'm showing right now, when it reads out exactly who and what is constituted as an Omega level mutant, Forge is not on that list. However, he is used as an example as to why he is not an Omega level mutant. Magneto just says plain as day here that Forge is. He's an Omega technopath, which is very counter to what Hickman said in House of X #1. Now, with that being said, the Cerebro Drive that our newly crowned Omega mutant Forge has created, this is basically a portable way to back up mutants that are far away or out of reach of Xavier's telepathic ability to back up their minds to the Cerebro on Earth. And Magneto destroys it because, as he says himself in this issue, that he is not afraid of death. He actually welcomes it. Magneto says himself he doesn't want to be deathless. He doesn't want to live forever. He doesn't fear very many things, but what he does fear is living forever. What he doesn't fear, as he puts it plainly, is a life that ends. He's not afraid of death. He's perfectly okay with dying because, once again, it means that he has something to live for. And this is a huge commentary. One of the biggest criticisms people had about, the current state of the X-Men is that they can't die, so why does it mean anything? But here's the thing that people weren't really understanding when Hickman put that into place. You see, if you give somebody something, if you elevate them to great heights and make it to where they literally have no problems, what you have to do is then start taking some of those things away, putting some of those things in danger. If the X-Men can't die permanently, if they can be resurrected whenever they're killed, I have constantly said that there are ways to make that still be a dangerous thing. Once again, going back to what happened with Rockslide in Ten of Swords, that was a huge blow to the Krakoans during that event because, as we all knew, if they're going to have this tournament that, is going to be to the death, and some of it was, some of it wasn't, but if they were going to have this tournament, that meant that certain characters could have very well likely died, but why would that have mattered if they could be resurrected? And then we learned when they died in Otherworld, it meant that when they were resurrected, it meant that they could very likely come back as incredibly different characters. And that's exactly what happened. And they've done it yet again with this, taking away Magneto and Storm's backups, meaning they can't be resurrected. But anyways, that's everything I wanted to talk about with X-Men Red number 4. This issue was fantastic. And once again, I just keep saying it, Al Ewing is writing what is ostensibly tied for first place as the best X-Men book out right now. But anyways, if you want to learn more about the Great Ring of Arrako that I mentioned earlier, check out this video up here that'll tell you everything you need to know about the Great Ring of Arrako and why there are 3 seats that we don't know about yet. And if you want to learn more about how Mr. Sinister has already cloned a version of Taran Young Carey, check out this video right here and find out more about that. But in the meantime, let me know what you thought about X-Men Red number 4. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.